What's up, football heads? I'm back. Bonus episode. I'm going to go through some of these key trade deadline trades and I don't know, just talk about it a little bit, I guess. I'll be honest with you. I had no idea that Trey White was on the Rams, and I literally just went to a Rams game 2 weeks ago. And if I did know Trey White was on the Rams, I sure as shit forgot. But Baltimore sending a 2026 seventh round pick to Los Angeles for Trey White and a 2027 seventh round pick. So, like, Mickey Mouse, they're getting him for free, basically. I don't know how much you're getting out of Trey White. I think this is probably a better situation for him. I feel like they're a little more solid in the defensive back room than the Rams are. And with a guy like Trey White, who used to be a star, used to be a shutdown guy, had a lot of injuries, is getting up there in age, you're not expecting Trey White to be peak Trey White. But if he can go in a situation where they don't need him to be a top guy, whereas the Rams need a little more out of him than I think Baltimore needs, like for them, I think this becomes a good depth option. I think that's a better spot for him to have some success. And again, you're swapping a 2026 seventh for a 2027 seventh. So, like, it's Mickey Mouse shit. So you're more or less getting him for free, pushing a seventh round pick back a year to get a rental on whatever's left with Trey White as a depth guy. Maybe it'll be completely inconsequential, but you get later in the year, Baltimore were expecting to make a playoff run. It feels like they lose a corner every year. So just to have a guy that knows what he's doing, just to add depth, I feel like you can't fault either one of these teams. I assume he was not getting much run with the Rams. Like I said, I was at the Rams game 2 weeks ago. Didn't hear about him, didn't know he was there. So I don't have any issue with this from either team. I don't know that it's going to be any sort of groundbreaking situation, but Trey White, he's a name. He deserves that respect as we talk about him. This one I did not see coming. Pittsburgh sends a 2025 seventh round pick to Green Bay for Preston Smith. Now, I don't know if this is a case of Preston Smith, again, another guy who's on the wrong side of 30. If they just got a lot of young guys, like obviously Green Bay has poured a lot of assets, a lot of draft capital, early draft capital, first round draft capital into their defense. Ton of guys. I don't know if they just have a bunch of young guys that are just they're mixing them in more with the pass rush, and Preston Smith is just starting to get phased out. I don't know. I did not see this coming. I couldn't tell you at all how Preston Smith is doing this year. So I guess Packers fans let us know, let the Steelers fans know what they're getting right now. I just know as a Vikings fan going up against this guy that he has wreaked havoc in the not so distant past. So I think Pittsburgh adding another piece, like obviously they got Highsmith, they got TJ Watt, so you don't need Preston Smith to come in and be, this dynamic top edge rusher for your team. But adding a depth piece to an already strong defense, to an already strong unit, you're only giving up a seventh round pick. I would question it from Green Bay's perspective just because I know Preston Smith has been a great player for them. But again, I don't know how he's figured in necessarily this year. So this, like I said, could be a situation where he's getting phased out. Let's check Spotrac and see what his contract situation is. I would assume a move like this that he's at the end of his deal or he's got too much left on the deal. But then I guess I don't know why you would do that if you were Pittsburgh. But let's see. Oh, yeah, he's got 2 more years on his deal after this. $13.4 million cap next year, $14.1 in 2026. He's 32 right now. He'll be 34 in the last year of the deal. So this could be a situation where Green Bay, they're moving on to younger guys. They have guys that they like that they're moving to. And this is a chance to get $13-14 million salary cap hit in the next couple of years. Get that off the books. You're giving him away for cheap, but they're taking on the salary. So that would be my assumption there. But like I said, again, he's 32 years old, but Preston Smith in the not too distant past I've seen him wreak some havoc. So this could be a nice piece for the Steelers to complement who they already got there. Steelers also made a deal all through the offseason. Are they going to trade for Brandon Ayuk? There might have been a little T. Higgins chatter that got swept away because obviously that's a divisional opponent, but Pittsburgh gets Mike Williams from the Jets, a short tenure with the Jets in exchange for a 2025 fifth-round pick. I think this makes sense from both sides. The Jets, they got Devontae Adams. They got Garrett Wilson. I believe Alan Lazard is on IR now, but I like Conklin, so you got Conklin in there. You got Breece Hall, so you still got all these weapons. They got Malachi Corley, who dropped the ball before getting into the end zone on Thursday against the Texans, so obviously that was a mistake. But Malachi Corley is a guy I really liked coming out of the draft. You could do different things with him, which I think makes him an interesting complement to Devontae and to Garrett Wilson. So I think if Malachi Corley is going to factor in more to the offense now, Xavier Gibson, that it made sense to move on from Mike Williams. He wasn't getting a ton of targets, wasn't getting a ton of catches, had a lot of drops. There was, Aaron Rodgers that called him out at one point, and it wasn't working. It didn't really feel like a fit for whatever reason. You got a young guy that could factor in, that kind of does some different things that could complement your top two guys. So I think it makes sense from the Jets to move on from. Again, they sign him in the offseason. You end up getting a fifth-round draft pick for him. I don't know how much. I would assume Pittsburgh is going to take on the rest of his deal, which I'm not sure how long the Jets signed him for. I know he signed late, so it may be a short deal. Yeah, it's only a one-year deal. So he's 30 years old. So I like that from the Jets' perspective. From the Steelers' perspective, you get someone to add across the field from George Pickens. With Mike Williams, he kind of made his hay with the Chargers on those deep routes on the sideline. Russell Wilson's your starting quarterback. What's Russell Wilson known for? Scrambling around, buying extra time, bombing the ball downfield. Now, I know it's not quite as pretty. It's not quite as glorious as it was in his Seattle days, but he's still capable of it. There's other like schematic reasons why his game has sort of dipped in the past few years in terms of how defenses are playing that kind of offense. But either way, you get a big body, deep threat, fits well with your quarterback. You add another weapon. You're giving up a fifth-round pick for it. Fuck them picks. You're 6-2, you might as well go for it. So this trade I do like for both teams. What else we got? The Detroit Lions, they finally made a move. Dan Campbell had been hinting at this to find a pass rusher with the Aiden Hutchinson injury, him probably being out through the end of the year. They say he could come back from the Super Bowl, which, we not picking the Lions to go to the Super Bowl right now, so might see him back, but long time between then and now. Detroit receives a 2026 seventh-round pick and Zadarius Smith from the Browns in exchange for a 2025 fifth, 2026 sixth. Now, I'm not sure how Z's been playing this year. I know he played really well last year. I know the year before when he was in Minnesota for the 1 year, he was killing it. Had like 9 sacks in the first half of the season, something like that. Then he got injured. Kind of didn't do as much late in the season dealing with the injury, but he's still a force out there. He's still someone that the offensive line is going to have to contend with. They're going to have to understand how to protect. He's not just some slappy getting marched out there. Again, I'm not sure how he's been doing so far this year. The injuries always a concern with Zadarius. You kind of got to take that into consideration whenever you're projecting what you're going to get from him. He might miss some games, but he's got 1 year in his deal after this, 2025. It's only $5.4 million, so that's not too bad. He's 32. He'll be 33 next year. He gave up a fifth and a sixth. You get a seventh back. You get Zadarius Smith back. I think it's a solid move. Like the Lions, they got a ton of depth. They got a ton of talent on the team. Like you're not desperate to hang on to a fifth and a sixth round pick. And you get a guy that you know can play. He could play right now at a position that you need because of the Aiden Hutchinson injury. So I think it makes a ton of sense on both sides here. Again, I don't know, Z, man, when he's healthy and he's on, he's a force. He's a force. This is not an insignificant pickup, in my opinion. Again, I don't know how he's playing this year. He might be another guy that he's a little too far over the hill, but again, he played really well last year, played really well the year before, played really well for Green Bay for several years prior to that. You're not giving up too much from him. And from the Browns' perspective, he's old. You get to offload some money for next year, that $5.4 million, and like you're not going anywhere at this point. If Jameis had come out and won a second game, maybe you convince yourself like, oh, we can go on a run here. Not that they'd be buyers at the deadline necessarily, but you might be a little more hesitant to move off of pieces. But even then, like this is a piece that it makes sense, I think, for the Browns to move off of at this point in time. Like they're not contending. They're not going to make the playoffs. He's a 32-year-old pass rusher. He's going to be 33 next year. You can clear that $5.4 million off the books and get a couple draft picks in return for it. Khalil Herbert to Cincinnati for a 7th-round pick. Not bad. I know the Vikings kicked around with the Bears on Khalil Herbert before they made the Cam Akers trade, which was a pick swap. So Bears, I guess, a smart move holding off. They just get a straight-up draft pick for him. Nothing. I like Khalil Herbert. He's a nice little player. He's not changing the calculus for the Bengals, but it's, I believe they got a recent injury in the running back room, so you're adding depth at a position where you might need some right now. You're only giving up a 7th-round pick. Not terrible. And you're the Bears. They were looking to trade him. They were at least having trade talks. You get a 7th-round pick instead of the pick swap if they had done the Vikings deal. So I think it works. What else we got here? Khalil Davis from the Texans to San Francisco for a 7th-round pick. Don't have much to say there, to be completely honest. Don't know much about the man. Wish him all the best in San Francisco. We got the last two here from today. Which order do I want to go in? I'll save the big one for last. The Cowboys. Oh, my God. The Cowboys trade a 2025 4th-round pick for a 2025 7th-round pick and wide receiver Jonathan Mingo from the Carolina Panthers. And all you ever hear about Jonathan Mingo when it comes to football is not good. I believe he's a second-year player. I believe he might have been a 2nd-round pick. I know he was fairly high up there, but you see the memes of him. You see the plays, all the various memes and collections of clips out there of, oh, Bryce Young is so terrible. And then the point of the clip is to show like he's hitting the receivers right in the hands and they just can't catch, or they're just doing stupid shit. And he very much was among them. And yes, he was a 2nd-round pick, 39th overall pick last year. So I guess the logic from Dallas's perspective is it's only his 2nd year. He's in Carolina, dumpster fire organization. They're bringing along a young quarterback. They turn over the entire offensive coaching staff. They're like, whoever Jonathan Mingo is, certainly the Carolina Panthers are not getting the best out of him, and they're not doing the best job of developing him, his quarterback, or the people around him. So if you're Dallas, you're thinking, we got Dak under contract for the long term. We got CD. We got weapons. He's not going to – we don't need him to be a stud, but he was a second-round pick. We're giving up a fourth and getting a seventh back. Maybe we can hit on this, and, we're getting a second-round quality player if we can develop him in our system with our pieces, our weapons, our quarterback, and we're getting him for a fourth-round pick, and they're kicking in a seventh-round pick. So I think that's probably the logic, but nothing you've seen from Jonathan Mingo in a season and a half would suggest that it's a smart move for Dallas, especially Dallas, who has been clowned since the offseason for not doing anything. Jerry Jones coming out saying we can't afford it. We couldn't afford Derrick Henry. And Jonathan Mingo is a second-round pick in the second year of his deal, rookie contract. So it's affordable, but for as much flack as Dallas has been getting since the offseason for just not doing anything, I anticipate that we're going to go all in. And then they do absolutely nothing except eventually extend a couple of their guys and pay more for it than if they had done it months earlier. And now here they are giving up a fourth-round pick for a guy that thus far has been a complete and total bust. So if you're Carolina, you're punting on the guy pretty early, especially when you're looking at it thinking, like, have we done this guy the best service that we could have? Have we developed him to the best of our abilities? Probably not. But nobody's ever honest with themselves in the NFL. So they're punting on him a year and a half into the experiment. So that either means they've definitely seen enough and are like, yeah, just get this guy out of here, and we'll take whatever we can get for him. There's a sucker born every day, and today that sucker's name is Jerry Jones. But on the flip side, it could just be that Carolina sucks and their organization sucks and they're terrible at developing. And you can say whatever you want about the Cowboys. You can hate them all you want. They're not doing well this year. But the last handful of years, strong handful of years, Jerry Jones has drafted some really good talent, and they have developed that talent very well. It is a very talented team. It's a team that lacks discipline. It's a team that's too focused on its own individual brands. They might have a problem paying Dak $60 million when I think most people look at Dak and just say he's a more expensive Kirk Cousins at this point, with no offense to either one of those guys, but neither one of them is a top 5, top 4 quarterback to be paying him $60 million. But nobody with a straight face can say that Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys over the last 5+ years have not drafted a fuck ton of talent and have not developed that talent very well. So it wouldn't shock me if we get a much better Jonathan Mingo with the Cowboys, but it also wouldn't shock me if this ends up being a complete waste. And even then, like, even if they're right, even if Jonathan Mingo turns into a really solid number 2 receiver that you're essentially getting for a 4th-round pick, like, that ain't bad. I think most people would take that, if not everyone, if they don't already have one. But even then, it's like, did you really need to give up a 4th? Like, they traded Amari Cooper years ago for a lesser pick than this, or a 4th-round pick. So, like, then Amari Cooper was in his prime at the time. Like, they only traded him because of money reasons. So I don't know. I think when you put all those deals together, it becomes very questionable. When you think about the compensation, it's pretty questionable. But I can understand where Dallas is coming from. And again, it would not shock me. It would not shock me if we get a much better Jonathan Mingo with the Cowboys. I'm not necessarily anticipating it, but I don't think it would be shocking, considering it's coming from the Panthers. It's not coming from a team that has a bunch of talent. It's not coming from it. It's not like the Kansas City Chiefs drafted a receiver and are like, you know what, get him out of here. Like, then like Sky Moore, for example. If they traded Sky Moore to somebody, I don't know that you're sitting there thinking like, well, the Chiefs couldn't figure him out, but we're gonna make this work. We're gonna get the best out of him. Like, in this case, it's the Panthers. They're unanimously considered the dumpster fire of the league. So wouldn't shock me. But the biggest splashiest trade of the day, involving the most draft capital. The Commanders and the Saints. The Saints receive a 2025 third round pick, a 2025 fourth round pick, a 2025 sixth round pick, and they send to Washington a 2025 fifth and Marshawn Lattimore, cornerback, long time player for the New Orleans Saints. Beloved by the Saints fans, known for his big plays and his big fights with Mike Evans. Hopefully the Commanders and the Bucks play each other sometime down the line in the next year or two, and we can get another one just not involving the Saints. But it's going to take me a second, honestly, to break down the amount of capital in this, and just process it in my mind. But I think it's something that makes sense in principle, right? Like the Commanders, 7-2, they don't have an exceedingly tough schedule down the stretch outside of those two Eagles games. They're in a position to not just make the playoffs, but win the division and have a fairly high seed when you think about the pecking order right now in the NFC. Detroit's at the top. And then just based on Washington, and I've talked about this, not being as battle tested, I wouldn't put them necessarily as the second best team. I think Minnesota and Green Bay, if push comes to shove, I would take Minnesota or Green Bay against the Commanders right now. It should be a close game, should be a good game. I'm not saying the Commanders can't win. I'm not saying those teams would win 100 out of 100 times, but I would bet on those teams. There's just some more experience, more playmakers. They're both more battle-tested, specifically the Vikings, and you just have a little more faith in their situation and the experience that they have on the roster. But the Commanders, they'd be the 2 seed because Minnesota and Green Bay would be wild cards. So if you got a real shot, like the path is in front of you, you control your own destiny to be the number 2 seed in the NFC, and you have an opportunity to get a stud player, a star player at a position of need and a position group of need in the defensive backfield. I mean, I don't hate it. I don't know how much capital the Commanders have. I don't know if they made any deals and they have extra picks maybe in 2025 that makes this even easier to part with. But, I mean, more or less, you're giving up a 3 and a 4 and you're upgrading a 6th to a 5th. So just on face value, without knowing the pick situation for Washington, you're going to have your 1, you're going to have your 2, you'll have 2 5s and a 7. And you get Marshawn Lattimore. So it's a lot of capital. Maybe if it was like, we'll give you a 2 and you kick back the 5, it might be easier to stomach because you're not just giving up so much of your next draft class. But let me see if I can look up Washington Commanders draft picks for 2025. Let's see if they have anything extra. But, I mean, they're going for it. And I don't think you can really fault them for trying to grab a position of need. And, okay, let's see. They still have a 3rd round pick that they got from Philly. So they'll have a 1. They have their own 1, their own 2, Philly's 3rd rounder, New Orleans 5th rounder, and then they got 3 7th round picks. So you still got a 7-pick draft class. You still got the 1, 2, 3. You still got your 5 and then 3 7s. Like 3 7s versus a 6 and a 7, whatever. And more or less you're just missing your 4th round pick at that point. So I think with that considered, having the extra picks from Philly, the 3 and 2 7s, I like it for them. I think it's a good move, it's a smart move. You still got plenty of picks next year. You still got picks in the first 3 rounds. It's not going to kill you. How old is Marshawn Lattimore? He is 28 years old, so you figure, should have at least another couple good years left in him. But I do know that he hasn't played a full season since 2021, so that's another thing to consider here. But at the end of the day, like, you can't get cold feet with shit like that. It's not. You can't project future injuries based on past injuries. Not all the time, at least. So I think it's a good move for them. And for the Saints, like, we all know, like, they're in cap hell. They've been in cap hell forever, and somehow they still manage to just keep kicking the can down the road somehow. But it's time. You're firing your coach, or they fired their coach. You're gonna get rid of your quarterback. It's gonna be a complete and total rebuild. I'm almost surprised they didn't trade Alvin Kamara, even though I think they just gave him a new contract recently. But you might as well unload some pieces. You add a third, a fourth, and a sixth in exchange for a fifth. So, like, now you look at, let me see if I can get the Saints' first round picks next year. Because if they got all their picks, like, now you got a loaded draft class, and it's not just having that many picks, but being able to package picks and move up. If you got a 1, here, let's see. Here we go. Saints draft picks 2025. They got a 1, a 2, 2 3s, 2 4s, 2 6s. So that's a ton of shit. You want to go up and get an extra second round pick, you can do that. You want to go up and get another third round pick. They got enough picks here to package and move up and get a second first round pick if they want to. So they got a lot of maneuverability, or they can stand pat, and they got, 8 picks and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 picks in the first 4 rounds, 2 3s, 2 4s. So I think this is another one. It makes sense for both teams. I think considering where the Commanders were at with having an extra few picks next year makes it easier to part with those. You get a guy that fills a position of need right now. He's still in his prime. And the Saints, like, yeah, it's time. It's time to start unloading some of this shit and just rip the Band-Aid off. Finally, rip the Band-Aid off. Like, it's not happening. They tried to go seamlessly from the Drew Brees, Sean Payton era into this Derek Carr, Dennis Allen bullshit. And they should have just, when Brees retired and Sean Payton had his opportunity, he had the couple years with they had Jameis, they had Teddy. Once that didn't work out and Sean Payton left, they should have ripped the Band-Aid off there. It wasn't worth it. Some other trades from the recent past. Obviously, we talked about DeAndre Hopkins on Let Me Talk to You Tuesday, and he's already paying dividends for the Chiefs, and everyone is pissed off about it. Linebackers swap with Seattle and Tennessee, including a 4th-round pick. Josh Uche going to Kansas City. Seems like he, just another depth piece, another pass rusher. I feel like that's another good pickup to help bolster an already strong defense. Patriots suck, so, like, offload some assets. But I think Deontay Johnson coming to Baltimore. Deontay Johnson and now we got to go back to Dallas. Because Carolina, they trade wide receiver Jonathan Mingo to Dallas, and they get a 4th-round pick for a second-year receiver that they're already moving off of. And you get Deontay Johnson, who's proven in the league. We've seen him do good things in Pittsburgh. He signs in Carolina in his first year, halfway through the season, and they ship him off for a pick swap of a 5th and a 6th-round pick. A pick swap of a 5th and a 6th versus the pick swap of the 4 and the 7 with Dallas for Mingo. This is what makes Jerry Jones look bad. This is what makes Dallas look fucking stupid in this deal. Even if Jonathan Mingo ends up being a solid player for them, even if he turns into a nice number 2 receiver for them across from CeeDee Lamb, you're going to look at this and say, how the hell is Baltimore getting Deontay Johnson for a 5th and a 6th round pick swap? And we're getting Jonathan Mingo for a 4th and a 7th round swap. Make it make sense, Jerry. Make it make sense. Man. And I guess we'll touch on my Vikings. Cam Akers, Cam Robinson both had pretty solid games. Cam Akers looked good, seems to have supplanted Ty Chandler as the number 2 running back behind Aaron Jones. Cam Robinson, I believe he was credited with 4 pressures. Didn't seem that way. Just first blush, just watching the game, it felt like Cam Robinson was playing pretty damn well. So when you consider how damn good Christian Darrisaw is, you lose him for the season. At that point, you're 5-2. Now they're 6-2. You still feel like you're in the mix. You got a shot to do something. They felt from training camp that they were going to be a lot better than everyone on the outside thought they were, and they've proven that thus far. I know ESPN had their little, their simulation for the season. It was either Seth Walder or Bill Barnwell. It doesn't matter. They're all stooges. And they had the Vikings at a league worst 3-14. They are now 6-2. So that proved to be prophetic that we were going to be much better than people thought. And you lose a massive piece. I talked about it earlier in the week or last week that Christian Darrisaw, other than the quarterback, because the quarterback is the quarterback and quarterbacks are quarterbacks, and that's just the facts. But other than the quarterback, that Christian Darrisaw, probably the most irreplaceable player on the team. But you go out, you get a guy, you get a starting caliber guy. I'm not expecting him to be a Pro Bowl or a stud. It's not like he's been playing lights out for the Jags recently, but conditional pick swap here, a 5th and a 7th. You get a starting caliber tackle. Instead of having to move Blake Brandel to left tackle, and then what do you do? Then you install Dalton Reisner at left guard or something like that. It lets you keep your guys where you've had them, where they've been playing pretty solid ball. And Quessenberry has played good in relief for Christian Darrisaw before. This is not an indictment on David Quessenberry. I think it's an indictment on the depth maybe behind him, because behind him you got a rookie, 4th or 5th round rookie, Walter Rouse, 5th round rookie. So if Quessenberry gets hurt, then we might be fucked. So I think it's good insurance for the depth to keep Quessenberry as your swing backup tackle, as opposed to having then a rookie from the 5th round as a swing backup tackle if either Cam Robinson or Brian O'Neill goes down. So I think in the long run, the Vikings already sort of bleeding future draft capital, but it's a conditional 5th in 2026. I think you can kind of deal with that, and you're willing to do that for a 1-year rental here, or a half-year rental for at least a starting caliber tackle. So I think that makes sense. But that's the trade deadline. If you're a fan of one of these teams, did you like your trade? Did you not like the trade? If so, why? And if you're not a fan of one of these teams, you're a fan of one of the other teams that did not make a trade, are you happy that your team didn't make a trade? Do you think your team should have made the trades? Do you think they should have gone out there and done more? I don't know. So you let me know. And that's that short little bonus episode, about 34 minutes here. NFL trade deadline action. Not a ton of big names, but Marshawn Lattimore, I think, key piece here. Zadarius Smith could be an impact guy. But that's the 2024 NFL trade deadline here. Football heads, like, subscribe, tell your friends, do all that good shit. And as always, until next time, take it easy, football heads.
Move it, football head!